questions for all of you, having, trying to put a positive learning environment and trying to, if a child, puts out an answer that's not there and you want to be positive, but, because sometimes you can say, well, I can see how you did that.
Mm-hmm.
How do you address when a child yells out an answer or, and it's blatantly wrong? But how, what are your responses to them to bring them back to not making them feel, I'm never going to yell out again because, she said, no, that's not right. What are some positive comments to make to?
Me personally, I first tell them, thank you for sharing, but remember how to answer a question. And then I ask them to try and explain their answer. How did you come up with this answer? And then they realize most of the time, wow, this is not correct. And I tell them, through mistakes we learn. And thank you for being brave enough to share. And that's how we're going to learn.
That's pretty much what we do. Yeah, we're
brave enough to share.
Brave enough to share. Because you do have to be brave. And I said, it's through our mistakes that we learn. I said, the first time you ever touched a hot stove, you learned that was a mistake and you're not going to do it again. And you learn through that. And that's what I tell them. And then it takes most of them, they're good. But I know I have a few treasure.
Oh.
Seriously, I'm like, dude, we cannot cry every time you get the wrong answer. I mean, he had a complete meltdown yesterday. Every time I answered, I'm like, it's through that is how you're going to learn. If you knew everything, why would you be here?
Don't call on him. He also has a meltdown.
That too. So
it's a But I don't want to, cause a child not to call out. And, so I want to make sure that I say, and then we do, thank you for sharing, but, and I have said, well, how did you get that? But,
and then sometimes I use the boards too, so that everybody gets an opportunity to answer. And then it's like, okay, I'll pick one and say who has this one, and then they'll, so
sometimes
that's how I do that.
At the beginning, I did this a lot at the beginning of the school year, with number talks or whatever. I say, like we talk about how when you yell out an answer, it automatically makes my brain shut off because I think you got the answer. So before almost every discussion, like the first 3 weeks of school, it was like, remember, when I ask you this question, do not yell out, because when you shout out, it gives us permission to just shut our brains off because you think you got the answer, but we need to help each other think and process and get through it. So, I mean, I still have a few that don't.
So much that they want the answer, so they.
And then sometimes what I do is I'm going to ask a question, but before I ask it, I want you to give yourself 10 seconds to think about it before you raise your hand. And I'll little sit there going 10, 9, 8.
She'll say touch your nose. She'll say
the-
touch your nose. The little kids, when you have your answer, touch your nose. And if we do stuff like that enough, then Carlton will quit shouting out.
Yeah.
Because some of them are just shouting and not
10, 12, 30.
And I almost am ready to like kick him out of the lesson because he's so,
Because once a child does,
then everybody wants to shout out either what he said.
And another thing is I want the answer and your proof. And then they'll go, oh, and your explanation.
Yeah.
So now I just don't want the answer, I want the answer and the explanation. Then I see a lot of hands going down. Because then they start to think about it too.
Yeah, to know that when they know that correct answer is not enough, and you have to be able to explain, then they have to take some think time. I'm like, well, shoot, what am I going to say?
And we do have that, but a lot of them are still doing that counting on. Even with our nice poster right there, the make 10, the doubles plus one, it's like, we all want to use the count on, but, give me another one,
Yes, and that's what you want to say. Because second grade shared that yesterday, that their kids, they have a lot of kids that want to stick with that counting on, because that's the focus in first grade. But if they're required, okay, yeah, you've done that, fantastic, show me another way now. And now they are forced to show you another way, and they're forced to think about, what else can I do besides
Are
counting?
you in there when they said, well, I put 5 in my head and I counted on to by 7, and then I said, well, now you need to, well, I put 7 in my head and I counted on by 5, and I'm like, and what property was that?
Yes, you
but it's like, you showed me another way,
Right. But is it technically another way? So, a different strategy. I guess the verbiage.
There's different strategy. You have to be so careful with your strategy, because when the sub I had the other day, she said, what spot is this? And my kids are like, Miss Faust has never mentioned a spot. Don't bring that woman in here. So, I mean, it's very hard, you know, when you do have one, and they think that, you know, some of them can teach. I mean, Miss, who I have can, but, you know, it's like, Miss Faust, where's the spot?
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I think she meant the place value.
And I actually had to do this in my class because I realized like a lot of my kids were taking every word I said as like the bread and butter. So one day we were doing an over talk and I purposefully, like they shared their strategies, a couple kids got it wrong. I shared a strategy and I made myself get the wrong answer. And then I had to talk about how, see, I tried something and it didn't work. So I had to go back and double check. And when they saw that I did it wrong, they were just like, how did you get it wrong? Like, it took me like 3 days to pep up myself that I was going to do the wrong problem in front of my kids. But like, it was one of those things where I showed them that it's okay if I do it wrong.
Right.
So it's okay if you do it wrong. So.
And then the fact that you thought through, I'm sorry for cutting you off, but the fact that you thought through it to model for them, okay, yeah, my teacher has said that it's wrong. Now, how did I get to this point? You know, that was a wonderful example for your kids. What were you going to say, Ms. Chief?
I was gonna say, I've done this before too, like sometimes after we go over a problem, especially like with our morning work or something, I'll say, okay, who got a different answer? Who did this? And then we'll talk about, oh, do you see what you did wrong? And I think if they're like choosing to share that they got the wrong, like they know they got the wrong answer, and they'll talk about like, oh, I should have done this, and you know, I should have added 10, or instead it makes them like, you know, maybe.
Taking that emphasis
Just want
off
it to
of the
be
correct
a,
answer
you
and
know,
on the process. Not the product, but the process, which is most important.
I think one way that I can stay away from things that'll have to cause me to go back is like not to teach like not to be biased with the way that I expose them to strategies, because I feel like I'm biased right now. I feel like my amount of time spent on all different ways is not equally shared. So the more they see us do a certain way, that's going to be the way that they resort to.
Right.
Because they see it. So I think that it's going to be work for me to be unbiased.
A lot of stuff in
the-
our toolbox.
in the exposure
Yeah.
time that I give each
Yeah.
different strategy.
Yeah. And that, I think that that's great because it allows the kids more time to now apply these strategies and
Not
see
just
which
to
ones,
see it once or twice.
work best
And I
for
do
them.
think it's a good you know, that is one of the pros I have seen in the co-teaching situation, because we do things differently, and, you know, I'll be doing something and she'll nod her head, okay, and then she'll be doing something and I'll go, I'm gonna do that, you know. So it's, you know, that is a lot of the, you know, the pros of having another person in the room, you know, teaching at times where, you know, you can be the learner.
Yes, yes. And speaking of being the learner, and thank you ladies very much for all of that transparency and sharing, I want to show you something really quick. One-stop shop for your resources.
Sweet.
What I've done, you said you have 8 shops.
Yeah.
So what I've done on